Welcome to City Cinematheque, where the art and pleasure of the movies are the subject of serious discussion. I'm your host, Jerry Carlson, and I teach film studies at the City College of the City University of New York. Today, as a part of our North African film series, we're showing the 2002 production Rachida. Now, this was the entry of Algeria in the Academy Awards that year, and I think you're going to see why they would be proud of the film. This is a story of a young female school teacher and her struggles with the terrorists that were, what can you say, terrorizing Algerian society during the civil war of the 1990s. It's a portrait both of urban life and of what was happening in the countryside. And it's made by a woman filmmaker, an extraordinary thing in any number of ways. After today's screening, we're going to have the opportunity to talk about that and a number of other themes with Professor Florence Martin of Goucher College, a noted expert on the cinema of North African women. Now, take this journey into the Algeria of the 1990s in Rachida. Welcome back to City Cinematheque, and welcome back after, I think, an extraordinarily powerful film that's very, very candid about many features of the terrible suffering of the Algerian people during the civil war of the 1990s. This is also strongly a woman's picture in any number of ways. It was written and directed by a woman, and of course, it's largely seen through the perspective of the women protagonists. And we have a special pleasure today to have, for the first time on City Cinematheque, an expert on these things, Professor Florence Martin from Goucher College. She is one of the editors of Studies in French Cinema, a British scholarly publication. And perhaps most importantly for our discussion today, Flo is the author of the recently published book, Screens and Veils, Maghrebi Women's Cinema, a study of women filmmakers of North Africa. Welcome to City Cinematheque, Flo.
Thank you.
Great. Let's just start with something that's sometimes a little bit difficult in the English-speaking world, and that is the simple word Maghreb, because it's not a word, it is now an English language word, it is used, but it's not commonly used, and that's why I've called the series North African Cinema, because it's easier for people to imagine it. But so what, just very briefly, is the Maghreb? And then we'll move on to women filmmakers in this film.
Okay. Maghreb in Arabic means the west, where the sun sets. And so it is actually the name for Morocco, which is the westernmost Arabic country. But it also designates the countries that you're calling North African, which is Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, and some say Libya, although I don't, because I am taking the French Franco-Arabic version of the Maghreb, and I wanted to stress the Arab, Berber, and French influences in the region that span Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia. The reason I do use Maghrebi and not North African is because I'm French. You have the luxury of being able to say North African, but the French called North Africa, that was a word to say our colonized countries, and so I could not do that.
Oh, I understand, but people should recognize that is. I mean, it is a word that whether you're reading Le Figaro or Le Monde, Express, whatever you're reading, you're listening on French radio or television. It's all part of the French mental geography of the world. That there are our three former territories, because they weren't all exactly colonies. There are three former territories of North Africa, and they exist in this relationship in many ways as the United States exists with Mexico and Central America. They're their closest neighbors with which there is multiple exchanges, largely in many ways of labor in most recent years in terms of migration. So we have a special part of the Arab world, which is multi-layered because it has a French colonial layer and it also has a pre-Arab layer.
Which is very important, and it's the Berber, the indigenous people who were there before the Arabs came after the death of Muhammad, and And this is they're called Imaziren in the Berber language.
Right.
And sometimes they clash, and sometimes they don't with the other strata of society. So you have the Berbers, you have the Arabs, then various invasions from the Romans, from the Phoenicians.
Right.
Finally, the French. It's a very multicultural society and culture, really.
Right.
It's a mingling that recycles itself.
Right, which is, I think, very important in understanding the experience of the characters in this film,
yes.
because what we're talking about is groups of people who are attempting, and this happens in different ways around the world in different forms, to impose a single or monolithic notion of what the culture is, where there are several thousand years of interplay of multiple cultures and impact. But before we go on to the film itself, I want to talk about, I will ask you a couple of things that you've thought about a great deal. First of all, there are challenges around the world to being a woman filmmaker, okay? I mean, it's not an easy thing. If we look at the percentages across the world, there is no nation that has produced a cinema in which women have been the dominant writing or directorial class, though there have been obviously very, very great women filmmakers, and there are more and more today. However, I think the challenges of being a woman filmmaker are special in the Arabic world. What, since you've been writing about all three countries in your book, what are some of the culture-specific challenges of becoming a woman filmmaker?
Well, first of all, you're dealing with image, which in the Muslim landscape has a different resonance than in our more Judeo-Christian or hopefully secular,
right.
in the French case. So trying to dealing with the image of people is one thing. Women are supposed to not speak. This is very, okay. So there you go.
Pretty, not a good starting place.
They're supposed to not speak, and they're supposed to hide because, I mean, some of the veiling is to prevent fitna, which is the Arabic term for not just temptation, but the chaos that ensues. So women provoke desire, and then men just provoke chaos as a result.
Okay.
All right. So there are the. So if somebody then takes a camera and films back, imagine what that means, right? So this is one, but that's a cultural thing, and then. Because you're not supposed to talk, and you're not supposed to talk about yourself, there are very few autobiographies, for instance, in that region,
Okay.
and even fewer by women. The ones that are, published by men are, scandalous or something like that.
Right.
Yeah. But so you do not talk. You do not speak. You do not speak about yourself. Private affairs are very importantly guarded, and so filming is the opposite. You're exposing. You're projecting on a screen for all to see, and so the way they did that, they had to go through various levels of censorship. There's also censorship, of course, which is the political one as well as the cultural one. And that ends up being a self-censorship, a form of self-censorship, because...
Well, let me just insert one thing into this that is part of the common problem, but seems to have a special accent here. And that is just to remind folks that cinema is an industrial art form. And when you say a cinema factory, it's not really an inaccurate thing, because factories or industrial processes are organized in terms of interlocking teams of people doing things. And you have to say this, much like the military, it's not democratic. There's strict hierarchies of authority. So insofar as women around the world have a problem entering, because there's a problem entering a management mentality that a woman gives instruction to professional teams, when you are talking about the specific cultural features that you've just mentioned, then this makes it even more difficult for a woman to be the person from which there is a trickle-down authority. That, quite literally, her word is the last word on how people in these teams behave and interact. And that's a special kind of courage, I think, and authority and a presence.
It is, and the women I've interviewed all told me they at various times had problems with the men in their team,
right,
who would not take their word.
Wouldn't take their word, would not take an order from a woman. So let's just move to this specific filmmaker, Yamina Bachir-Chouikh. Almost.
Bachir-Chouikh.
Exactly. Thank you. Thank you. Much more practice. Tell us a little bit about her background and how she would come to be able to do this, because it's a very powerful and accomplished film.
She was born in the mid-50s. And she studied at the cinema school of Algiers. So she's also a product of independence.
Okay, very important.
Very important to remember. And she became an editor, which I think it's interesting because lots of women from the Maghrebi women filmmakers are former editors, and they have this ability to tell, you know, to tell a story with images and rhythm and such.
Right.
So she did this. She is also married to a very famous in Algeria,
right,
filmmaker, Maghreb Chouikh, and she worked for the best of the best in Algeria. Sometimes even writing scripts for them.
Okay.
So she has that panoply of, you know, the gamut of skills that are necessary. Then.
And the confidence of people she's worked with in the past.
Yes.
Okay.
Then we shall I talk a little bit about what happens with this film in particular? So then the 88 happens, big riots. 1991. Basically the civil war starts in Algeria, right, and she ends up having to flee the country with Maghreb Chouikh and their children, and she goes to Paris. She's doing this because she's seeing intellectual after intellectual being assassinated.
Absolutely.
And women in particular being targeted. Actually, this is not said enough, that women were because they always symbolize, they always symbolize the origin of chaos. So in order to make this film, not only did she had to do an amazing construction of a financial assemblage that is amazing, borrowing, you know, getting one tiny grant here, going in France, and then in Belgium, and then a little bit in Algeria, and so on and so forth. In order to shoot a film at the time, it was an amazingly difficult thing, and so it took her 5 years.
Wow.
To be able to do it.
Okay. Okay, and so why? Let's move over into the film.
Yes.
Itself. What do you think? This is based upon some incidents that really happened. You know, it's one of those films that fictionalizes, but is still making a truth claim. That is all. We're changing this for storytelling purposes, not for truth-telling purposes. Right. So why this story? What do you think of the characteristics of this story that are important? Choosing Rachida as the kind of protagonist.
The real story that you mentioned, right, that is alluded to in the first credits of the film is the story of a young woman who was a teacher who was actually killed. The bomb exploded, okay, and so on. Okay. Zekia Gestab. I think she was interested in getting a character who would be a young female teacher, who is there to instruct the young at a time when it's impossible to do what, to instruct them with what. And yet this is the only hopeful gesture available to women, okay? So I think that is why she chose this. And in the end, you see this beautiful, when she turns her head to the people,
absolutely,
and faces the camera. I mean, there's determination. Algeria will go on.
Absolutely, absolutely the case.
And she is the embodiment of this young woman born after independence, there again important. Very Algerian, Francophone and Arabophone.
Absolutely.
And very free in some ways. She has an amazing, amazing repartee in this film.
Oh, very much so.
She's very direct with men who, or women who are not, disagree with her. And so it's this kind of spirit of survival that she wanted to.
Well, that brings us to something very interesting as a motif in the film that's a larger motif within the culture and much discussed, if not much understood here in the United States. And that is the relationship of the veil and the face. This is a film that begins with a close-up of a woman putting on lipstick. Yes. Okay, which would be the ultimate act in many ways of provocation within the culture. And then it is a film that in turn charts her journey and comes to an end with her with a full frontal view of her face looking at us and freeze frame on it. So it is a film about women who are in a country, some of whose residents believe they should always be veiled, that begins and ends with a woman's unveiled face. So explain and complicate the issue of veil for me as it appears in this film. What should we understand about the veil?
Well, in that, there's one thing that's not completely honest, I should say, about the fact that all the women who wear veils in this film seem to be forced to wear veils. I mean, they do say, the women who speak about it say, I do not want to risk my life, I do want, so, all right. And at the time, it might be the case because the Islamists are shooting everybody, so fine. So put that aside a minute, okay. And then let's look at what the veil does, because the veil both hides what would make a woman desirable according to the vision, the Islamist vision, or the Muslim vision,
right.
But also reveals that there is something to be hidden. So there is this politics of the gaze in the Maghreb that is constantly a give and take of what you see and what you guess and what you do not see and cannot see. So there is that. And in the middle of this film, what I found very complicated but also beautiful is this scene where Zora, who has been abducted by the GIA, comes back into the village, broken, in tatters, in blood, slumps down, and is afraid of men touching her. And the women have these beautifully colorful veils and unveil themselves in order to put the veils on her. So she becomes this colorful woman all of a sudden, and you no longer see anything bad having happened to her. And what is interesting is that the gesture of removing a veil in order to protect your sister is in and of itself, goes in and of itself against the JIA.
Right, absolutely.
So by removing their veils, these women disobey, and by putting it on her, the woman who was an outcast, they further disobey, yet they protect their sister. And they then in turn recreate or create a community of women that is in solidarity with one another.
Well, I think that's a wonderful analysis of the scene, and it also points out how the film tries to open, again, this kind of at least a third space, because there's two positions. The one position, which is of the fundamentalist position, is always the veil, and then if you cross the Mediterranean, the French Republican interpretation has been never the veil.
Right.
And so the scene you're talking about is really about how polyvalent the veil can be.
Beautiful.
That really, it is cloth. Its meaning is given by human action and by culture and by gesture. And if they take control of it, they can create new meanings. of it, which may not be aligned with either of these absolutist positions that stand on one side or the other.
Absolutely, and there's first of all, there's so many reasons why women wear veils throughout the Arab and Muslim world that it would be silly, sort of pointless to ascribe one reason. That the French are not doing this very well, as we both know, you know. For instance, sometimes in Algeria and in Tunisia, young women wear veils so that nobody, you know, so to avoid catcalls or
right.
to avoid, you know, right. So
it can be for self-protection, not to hide something that you wish to display.
Right.
So,
yes.
Absolutely. So let's talk. One of the interesting features of the film and the issues that come up about hair and that come up about the veil also come up in Rachida's relationship with her mother and the other women, the women they encounter. So how would you? We've located Rachida as a young woman who has been born into a certain sector of Algerian society after independence. So she's had enormous possibilities that have been
yes.
given to her by the secular interpretation of the revolution and the future of this. What do we get from her mother and from the other women we encounter?
Her mother, well, first of all, you know, most of the film is male-free. I mean, the guys are
Point
away.
well taken.
they're away. Husband, the father is gone,
right.
divorced, and so the mother is a very interesting character because she is a devout Muslim. She prays 5 times a day. She wears a veil or not. She's not, you know,
right.
it's not a big deal. Yet she divorced her husband. When her husband decided to take a second wife, she said, okay, I'm out of here. So, and yet it meant leaving her roots, which she keeps telling, imaging in the form of the fig tree that she's missing
Absolutely.
so much. So this is a pretty independent woman, even though she suffered socially because of her choices in life. But one cannot but imagine that this has had a very formative weight on her daughter. That's why she's probably so free and has been able to go, you know, study. Obviously, she's an educated woman. We don't know that about her mother, but she seems educated as well.
Well, they have this balanced relationship in which they seem to share many interests, even though they may differ over a point or so. And they're of the same class and culture in that way.
And the mother is reassuring and at the same time less judgmental than Rachida. Rachida has gone through trauma, clearly.
Right, absolutely.
And we hear about this, and all of Algeria is suffering from post-traumatic stress, basically, the film says. But at some point, and I think, you know, in 1999 came the reconciliation, for instance, the amnesty for everybody, where all of a sudden the government was saying to the people in the Maquis, to the Islamists, come down, come back to the city, we'll reintegrate you and we will forgive you. And Rachida says, what? And you know, what do you mean forgive? Why?
Right.
Why forgive?
Right.
And the mother is the sort of wise older woman who says, yes, you have no choice. You have to forgive. What else can you do?
Absolutely.
But Rachida is still this, you know, this woman full of emotions, and she has suffered physically.
Well, you bring up this very interesting point that by bringing in the word trauma, that this has a very interesting narrative structure in that she's shot very early. This is not built as a suspense film that goes on, you know, for that, but rather this is a film that spends a great deal of time with a traumatized protagonist and, as you point out so very well, in extension, a traumatized communities and nations. So it's much more a portrait of the effects upon people. And by its nature, trauma is lingering effect. That's the whole nature, is you cannot escape the effect and get from point A to C through B.
Yes. I think that's That's a very good point, and the fact that it doesn't even go back into a long flashback. Why did Sofiane? We're not interested in why the Islamist came with his bomb. Basically, we are interested in this film in what happened to Algeria once it is hurt so badly.
Very good point.
In the form of Rachida,
right.
And as this is going on, the one thing that I like also in this film, and this is getting a little bit away from the question, but is that Rachida is one of the few, real actresses in the movie. The rest are not the professional actors and actresses because Yamina Bachir-Chouikh wanted to film faces and to give faces to the victims of that war, and not let them lie in statistics on the papers.
I think we've actually come to an end, and I can't think of a better moment to summarize in many ways what the overall artistic intention of the director is in this particular moment. If you'd like more information about this series, about City Cinematheque in general, or about City University Television, please visit our website. Come to www.cuny.tv. When you get there, you're going to find click-ons, links, whatever you want to call them, to get information, and you're also going to find ways to communicate with us by, no surprise, email. And we'd love to hear from you. So please visit www.cuny.tv. Flo, thank you for bringing your expertise here. It's been a rich and wonderful 30 minutes, and I hope we'll have an opportunity to meet and chat again here on City Cinematheque.
Thank you so much. Indeed, I do too.
Great. And thank you for joining us today on City Cinematheque, and please join us again as we stroll through the archives of film history. For now, it's bye-bye.